15 years ago, my daughter left her 3 boys at my small apartment, promising to return in 2 hours. She never did. Now, she's suing me for kidnapping them. But the moment I gave the judge an envelope, he leaned back in his seat. "Do they know what this contains?" he inquired. "Not yet," I replied. The envelope quivered in my aged hands. From my seat in the courtroom, I watched my daughter Rachel meticulously adjust her designer blazer, the same calculated composure she'd shown when she abandoned her kids 15 years prior. At 62, I'd learned to recognize pivotal moments. This worn manila envelope, softened by my fingers tracing its edges through countless sleepless nights, held the undeniable truth that would shatter her carefully crafted facade. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Your Honor, Rachel's lawyer began, his voice smooth as silk over broken glass. My client has been denied access to her own children for 15 years. She's requesting immediate custody and pursuing kidnapping charges against the defendant, her own mother. Kidnapping. The word tasted like rust in my mouth. I pressed my lips together, feeling that familiar ache in my lower back. A constant reminder of countless nights in hospital chairs, keeping vigil over 3 small boys. They'd cried for mama in fevered dreams, and I'd whisper, "Grandma's here, baby, Grandma's here." Judge Morrison, a man whose silver hair and lined face suggested he'd witnessed every form of human cruelty, leaned forward. "Mrs. Brown, you've been caring for these children since they were 3 years old."
"Yes, Your Honor," my voice came out steadier than I felt.
Behind Rachel, I saw my boys, my grandsons, now 17, towering over most adults in the courtroom. Daniel sat between his brothers, his jaw clenched, a painful echo of their father. Marcus had his hands folded, knuckles white, while David fixated on the floor, as if willing himself to vanish into the worn carpet. They still didn't know about the envelope. They didn't know the full extent of their mother's actions. And during this time, the judge continued, the mother had no contact. "She visited twice," I replied carefully. "Once when they were 8, asking for money. Once when they were 12, staying 3 days before leaving again." Rachel shifted. Uncomfortably. I caught a fleeting glimpse of something, guilt, then fear, before her mask perfectly resettled. My daughter had always been beautiful. Even at 38, she possessed an ethereal quality that made people want to protect her, to believe any story she spun. It had taken me years to see past that beauty, to the cold calculation beneath. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client was struggling with postpartum depression and addiction. She needed time to heal. That doesn't negate her parental rights." Postpartum depression. As if that explained abandoning 3 toddlers who cried themselves to sleep for months. Toddlers who hoarded crackers under their beds, terrified there wouldn't be food tomorrow. Who jumped at every sound, their young minds unable to differentiate between footsteps that might bring their mother home and those that might take them away again. "Mrs. Brown," Judge Morrison's voice brought me back. "Do you have documentation of your guardianship?" This was my moment. I rose slowly, my knees protesting after hours on the hard wooden bench. "I do, Your Honor, but I'd like to present something else first." I walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling Rachel's eyes burning into my back. The envelope felt impossibly light in my hands, despite the immense weight of its contents. "What is this?" the judge asked, taking it from me. "Proof," I stated simply. "Proof of what a mother truly is." Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose as he opened the envelope. I watched his expression shift as he pulled out the first photograph, Daniel's. First day of kindergarten, a gap-toothed grin wide as he clutched his new lunchbox. Marcus receiving his first-place ribbon at the science fair, tears of joy streaming down his 6-year-old face. David, age 7, arms wrapped tightly around my neck after his first successful bike ride without training wheels. But it wasn't solely photographs. There were report cards, each meticulously preserved in plastic sleeves. Every teacher conference note I'd ever penned, permission slips for field trips signed in my careful handwriting, medical records listing my name as the emergency contact. The authorized guardian, the one who held their hands through broken bones and fevered nights. "Your Honor," Rachel's lawyer interjected. Childhood memorabilia doesn't. Sit down, Judge Morrison stated quietly, but with enough steel in his voice that the lawyer immediately complied. The judge continued to examine the contents, his face growing more solemn with each item. Mrs. Brown, how long did you compile this? 15 years, I replied. Every school event? Every birthday party they weren't invited to because their friends didn't know where their mother was. Every Christmas morning when they asked why she didn't call. Every Father's Day when they made cards for their grandfather, my late husband. Because they needed a father figure and he was all they had until cancer took him 5 years ago. I heard one of my grandsons make a small sound, pain or recognition, I couldn't tell, but I didn't turn. I couldn't bear to see their faces, not yet. Judge Morrison held up a specific photograph. Even from where I stood, I recognized it, the boys at age 10, standing in front of our small Christmas tree in my cramped apartment. They wore matching pajamas I'd sewn myself because money was tight. Their arms around each other, faces glowing with the pure happiness only children can achieve. Where were you when this was taken? The judge asked Rachel directly. She straightened, and for the first time I saw her composure crack. I was getting my life together. I couldn't. You couldn't what? Send a Christmas card? Make a phone. Call. His voice remained level, but a dangerous edge simmered beneath. Mrs. Brown, is there anything else in this envelope? I nodded. The school records, Your Honor, every form requiring a parent's signature, every emergency contact sheet, every permission slip for 15 years. He pulled out a stack of documents and I knew exactly what he was seeing, my name. Repeatedly in the space marked Mother Guardian, my phone number listed under emergency contact. My signature on everything from field trip permissions to medical treatment authorizations. And your daughter's name appears on these forms? How often? Never, Your Honor, not once. The courtroom fell so quiet I could hear the ancient radiator humming in the corner. Rachel's lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear, but she shook her head, her face pale. Judge Morrison set the envelope on his desk with deliberate care. Mrs. Brown, I have one more question. Do your grandsons know what's in this envelope? I met his gaze steadily. Not yet. And why is that? Because some truths are too heavy for children to carry, even when those children are nearly grown. Because I'd spent 15 years protecting them from the reality that their mother hadn't just left. She'd erased herself from their lives so completely that there wasn't a single piece of paper in any school office with her name on it. Because I wanted them to have the chance to know their mother without the weight of my judgment, I said. But they're old enough now to understand the truth. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression confirming he'd already made his decision. But before he could speak, Rachel abruptly stood. I made mistakes, she said, her voice breaking. But they're still my children. I gave birth to them. I love them. I turned to really see her. She was crying real tears, not the manufactured emotion she'd perfected over the years. For a moment, she looked like the daughter I'd raised, the girl who'd called me at 3. In the morning, pregnant and scared. The young woman who'd promised she'd be a good mother. But then I remembered the weight of 3 small bodies curled against me during thunderstorms. The pride in their eyes as I cheered at their baseball games. The way they'd started calling me Mama Grandma at 5. Because I was the only mother they'd ever truly known. Love, I said quietly, is not a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Mrs. Brown, step back, please. I need to speak with the boys. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched my grandsons stand. 3 identical faces, their father's dark eyes and stubborn jaw. Yet something of me in the set of their shoulders, in the way they moved protectively closer to each other. They approached the bench and I held my breath. Daniel Marcus David. The judge said gently, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you directly. Do you want to live with your mother? The silence stretched taut. Finally, Daniel, always the spokesman for his brothers, cleared his throat. Your Honor, he said, his voice deeper than I expected. We don't really know her. Those 6 words hung in the air like a death sentence. I saw Rachel flinch as if struck, saw her lawyer close his eyes in defeat. But it was what Daniel said next that would haunt me forever. But we'd like the chance to try. The words echoed in the sudden silence of my cramped apartment as I set down 3 mugs of hot chocolate, a ritual I'd maintained every evening for 15 years. Daniel's declaration in the courtroom had earned them a 2-week trial period. With Rachel, 2 weeks to decide if they wanted to pursue a relationship with the mother, who'd walked away when they still wore diapers. "Grandma, you're shaking," Marcus observed, his gentle nature always attuned to others' emotions. At 17, he'd inherited his father's analytical mind, coupled with an empathy that sometimes worried me. The world could be cruel to boys who felt too deeply. I looked down at my hands and realized he was right. The ceramic mug rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "No, you're not," David, the youngest by 12 minutes but often the most direct, pushed. His glasses up his nose, a nervous habit he'd developed in 3rd grade. "You haven't been fine since court yesterday." They were perched on my old couch, the one I'd bought secondhand when they were 5 and immediately declared the best fort-building material in the world. The fabric was worn thin where their knees had dug in during countless movie nights, and a faint stain remained from when Marcus had spilled grape juice during a particularly intense Monopoly game. "Boys," I said carefully, settling into my armchair, the one that faced the couch so I could always watch over them. "I want you to know that whatever you decide, I support you." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but some lies are necessary. Shields. How could I tell them that the thought of Rachel taking them felt like dying, that I'd already mentally cataloged every corner of this apartment where their absence would echo? "She wants us to move to Seattle," Daniel said quietly. "With her and her boyfriend. Rachel had mentioned him briefly in court, some investment banker she'd been with for 8 months. 8 months. And she thought that was enough stability to uproot the boys from the only home they'd ever known. "She showed us pictures of the house," Marcus added. "It has a pool." A pool, as if chlorinated water could wash away 15 years of abandonment, as if square footage could truly measure love. "And our own rooms," David chimed in, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. "She said we could redecorate however we want." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, my heart crumbling. "Like old paper." "That sounds nice, Grandma." Daniel leaned forward, his dark eyes so like his father's, serious beyond his years. "Why didn't you ever tell us about everything?"
He gestured toward the envelope, which now sat on my kitchen table like an accusation.
Judge Morrison had allowed me to take it home along with his decision. The boys could choose, but they needed the full truth first. I'd been dreading this conversation for 2 days. "Because," I said slowly, "children shouldn't have to carry their parents' failures." "We're not children anymore," Marcus said softly. He was right, of course. Somewhere between helping them with algebra homework and teaching them to drive my ancient Honda Civic, they'd grown into young men. They towered over me now, their voices deep, their faces showing the angular planes of approaching adulthood. But in my heart, they were still 3-year-olds with tear-stained cheeks, asking when Mama was coming home. "No," I agreed, "you're not." I stood and retrieved the envelope, my fingers tracing its familiar edges. Inside were not just photographs and documents, but the immense weight of every choice I'd made, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment I'd chosen their well-being over my own comfort. "Your mother was 23 when you were born," I began, settling back into my chair. "Younger than you are now. Your father, God rest his soul, was deployed overseas. She was alone with 3 babies, and I failed her." The words came out cracked, like glass under pressure. I never admitted this aloud, not even to myself. "What do you mean?" David asked. "I was working 2 jobs then. Your grandfather had just been diagnosed with his first bout of cancer, and the medical bills were crushing us. When Rachel called, crying, saying she couldn't handle it anymore, I told her she needed to be stronger. I told her that motherhood required sacrifice. I pulled out a photograph, one I'd never shown them, Rachel at 24, gaunt and hollow-eyed, holding all 3 of them while they screamed. She looked like a ghost of herself. "I should have seen that she was drowning," I continued. "Should have moved in, taken leave from work, something. Instead, I gave her advice from my kitchen while she was falling apart in hers. That doesn't excuse what she did, Daniel said, with a steel in his voice that painfully reminded me of myself. No, I agreed. It doesn't, but it explains it. Your mother didn't just abandon you. She abandoned the part of herself that was failing. Some people run toward their problems and some people run away. Rachel ran. Marcus was crying silently, tears tracking down his cheeks. David had gone very still, as he always did when processing difficult emotions. Daniel's jaw was clenched, his hands fisted. So why come back now? Daniel asked. Why sue you for kidnapping? This was the part I'd hoped to avoid, but they deserved the truth. I reached into the envelope and pulled out a folder I'd kept separate. From the rest, legal documents I'd received just last month. Your father had a life insurance policy, I said quietly. A substantial one. It was set up to be released when you turned 18, with your mother as the beneficiary since she was listed as your guardian. The silence that followed was deafening. She's only here for the money, David whispered. We don't know that for certain, I replied. Yes, we do. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking the small courtyard where I'd taught them to ride bicycles. The timing isn't a coincidence, is it, Grandma? We turn 18 in 3 months. 3 months? The number hung between. US like a countdown timer. There's something else, I said, hating myself for what I was about to reveal. She filed the paperwork to have me declared an unfit guardian 6 months ago, but she waited until now to serve it. Why? Marcus asked, though I could see in his eyes that he already knew. Because if I was found unfit, she would automatically regain custody. And as your legal guardian, she'd have access to the insurance money immediately, not when you turn 18. The betrayal hit them like a physical blow. I watched as the last traces of childhood hope drained from their faces, replaced by something harder, colder. It was like watching them age years in a matter of seconds. She never wanted us back, David said flatly. She wanted the money. We can't be certain of her motives, I said, though the words felt hollow even to me. Stop protecting her. Daniel snapped, whirling to face me. Stop protecting us. We're not babies anymore, Grandma. We can handle the truth. He was right. But the protective instincts I'd honed over 15 years were hard to suppress. I'd spent so long shielding them from Rachel's abandonment that I'd forgotten they were strong enough to face it. You're right, I said quietly. I'm sorry. Daniel's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. He crossed the room and knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his much larger ones. Don't apologize for loving us. The simple words broke something open inside me, and tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. These boys, these young men, had been my entire world for 15 years. I'd poured everything into raising them, sacrificed my retirement savings, my social life, my own dreams to give them stability and love. And despite the circumstances of their early childhood, they'd grown into remarkable human beings. What happens now? Marcus asked softly. I wiped my eyes and straightened my shoulders. Now you decide. You have a choice to make. And whatever you choose, I'll respect it. Even if we choose her? David asked. The question pierced my heart, but I met his gaze steadily. Even then, I knew that's what love truly was, not possession, but the willingness to let go when it served the other person's best interests, even if it destroyed you in the process. We need some time, Daniel said, to think. I nodded, understanding. They filed toward their shared bedroom, the small space where I'd somehow managed to fit 3 twin beds and the accumulated belongings of 17 years. I heard their voices through the thin wall, low and serious. The sound of boys becoming men in the span of a single conversation. I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of our life together, their school awards on the wall, family photos on every surface, the chaos of homework and sports equipment that somehow made the cramped space feel like home. My phone buzzed. A text message from Rachel. The boys seemed upset when I dropped them off. I hope you're not poisoning them against me. We need to talk before their decision. Can you meet me tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. She wanted to talk. After 15 years of silence, after a legal battle that had cost me my last savings, after trying to steal the children I'd raised, she wanted to talk. I typed back, Rosewood Cafe, 2 p.m. Then I set the phone aside and began planning what would be my daughter's final lesson in consequences. The Rosewood Cafe had been Rachel's favorite place when she was 16, back when she still called. Instead of using my first name like a stranger, I chose it deliberately, wanting her to remember who she used to be before greed calcified her heart into something unrecognizable. I arrived early, claiming the corner table where she used to do her homework while I worked the evening shift at the diner across the street. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent her entire childhood juggling multiple jobs to provide for her, only to watch her abandon her own children the moment things became difficult. At exactly 2 p.m., Rachel walked in, wearing a cream-colored coat that likely cost more than my groceries for 3 months. She'd always been beautiful, but now there was something artificial about her, like a photograph retouched too many times. Success suited her, I had to admit, even if it was built on a foundation of abandoning her responsibilities. "Mom," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. The words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Rachel," I kept my voice neutral, studying her face. At 38, she still looked young, but lines around her eyes hinted at something makeup couldn't quite hide. Guilt, perhaps, or just the natural erosion of time. She ordered a skinny latte with oat milk. Of course she did. While I stuck. With black coffee, some things never changed. "The boys seemed confused," she began once the waitress left. "I can tell you've been filling their heads with your version of events." My version. As if there were multiple interpretations of abandonment, as if the truth was somehow negotiable. "I told them the facts," I said quietly, "nothing more. Facts can be presented in different ways." She leaned forward, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I remembered from her teenage years when she wanted something. "You have to understand, I was sick after they were born. Postpartum depression is a real medical condition. You couldn't call for 15 years. The question hung between us like a blade." Rachel's carefully constructed explanation crumbled. For a moment I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear, perhaps. Or the dawning realization that her lies wouldn't work on me the way they had on her lawyer. "I wanted to," she said softly. "But the longer I stayed away, the harder it became. How do you explain to 3 little boys that their mother just left?" "You don't explain," I said. "You apologize, you come home, you do the work." "I was building a life. You were running away." My voice remained steady, but something cold and final settled in my chest. "And now you're back because that life you built requires funding." Rachel's face flushed. This isn't about money." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I'd prepared that morning, printouts from social media, public records, everything I'd researched after the court hearing. I spread them across the small table like tarot cards, revealing a bitter future. "Your boyfriend's investment firm is under federal investigation," I said conversationally. "His assets are frozen. You've been living in a house you can't afford, on maxed-out credit cards. Your car is 3 months behind on payments." Rachel stared at the papers, her face growing pale. "How did you—" "I may be old, but I'm not stupid." I tapped one of the documents. "You filed for bankruptcy protection 2 months ago. The same week you had me served with custody papers." The cafe bustled around us, the cheerful chatter of other patrons forming a surreal soundtrack to our confrontation. Rachel's latte sat untouched, foam dissolving into beige mediocrity. "Even if that were true," she said, rallying, "it doesn't change the fact that they're my children. I have rights." "Rights?" I tasted the word like something spoiled. "Tell me, Rachel, what rights did they have?" "The right to a mother who showed up. The right to birthday cards. The right to know they were wanted." "I made mistakes. You made choices." I gathered the papers and returned them to my purse with deliberate care. "Every day for 15 years, you chose not to pick up the phone. Not to send a letter, not to ask how they were doing. I thought they were better off without me." No, you thought you were better off without them. The accuracy of the statement hit her like a physical blow. I watched her composure crack, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the selfish girl who had always lurked beneath my daughter's pretty surface. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to leave. I can't do that. I need the insurance money." "Yes, I know." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your custody petition. You're going to return to Seattle and tell your boyfriend the money isn't coming.
And
You're going to leave my grandsons alone." "And if I don't?" This was the moment I'd been building toward, the culmination of 2 sleepless nights spent researching, planning, preparing for war. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a different folder, this one thicker, more substantial. "Then I'll destroy you." Rachel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "With what? You're a 62-year-old woman living in a studio apartment. What could you possibly?" I opened the folder and began laying out photographs. Not the sweet family moments from the envelope I'd shown the judge, but something else entirely. Screenshots from social media posts, credit card statements, hotel receipts, all obtained through perfectly legal means by a private investigator I'd hired with my last $1,000. "This is you in CBO last spring," I said conversationally, pointing to a photo of Rachel on a yacht, champagne glass raised in celebration. The same week Marcus was in the hospital with pneumonia. "I called every number I had for you. You never answered." Rachel's face went ashen. "This is your credit card statement from that trip. $15,000 on spa treatments and shopping while I was working double shifts to cover his medical bills." I moved to the next document. "And this is particularly interesting. Your marriage certificate to a man named Robert Hastings, dated 3 years ago. Apparently, you've been married this whole time, not just dating your boyfriend. How did you—" "Public records. Amazing what you can find when you actually bother to look." I spread out more papers. "Your husband, Robert, is the one under federal investigation, by the way. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, the kind of charges that carry serious prison time." Rachel was shaking now, her hands pressed flat against the table. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly," I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Those boys have been my whole world for 15 years. I have sacrificed everything, my savings, my retirement, my health, my social life, to give them the stability you couldn't provide. I will not let you waltz back into their lives and destroy them for money. They said they wanted to try. They said that because they're good boys with kind hearts, who still hope somewhere deep down that their mother might actually love them." I began gathering the papers. "But you and I both know that's not why you're here. You can't prove. I can prove all of it." I closed the folder with a snap. "Your financial situation, your marriage, your complete absence from their lives until it became financially advantageous to return. I have documentation of every lie you told in court." Rachel stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You're not the same person who raised me." "No," I agreed. "That woman was too trusting, too willing to believe that people could change." I stood, shouldering my purse. "The woman sitting across from you now has been forged by 15 years of putting 3 children to bed every night while they asked why their mother didn't love them enough to stay. I do love them. Love is not a feeling, Rachel. Love is showing up. Love is sacrifice. Love is putting someone else's needs before your own. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." I looked down at her, this stranger who shared my blood but none of my values. "You don't know what love is." I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "What if I fight you? What if I take this to trial?" I turned back, and something in my expression must have frightened her, because she pressed herself back into her chair. "Then I'll take everything to the media. The abandoned children, the missing mother who returned for money, the criminal husband, the bankruptcy, all of it. And when your reputation is destroyed, and your husband goes to prison, and you have nothing left, I'll make sure the boys know exactly what kind of person their mother really is." "You wouldn't do that to them. Try me." I walked out of the cafe into the crisp afternoon air. leaving Rachel sitting alone among the ruins of her carefully constructed lies. My hands were steady now, my purpose clear. She'd had 15 years to prove she was a mother. Now she had 15 hours to prove she was smart enough to walk away. But as I drove home to my grandsons, I knew with cold certainty that she wouldn't leave quietly. People like Rachel never do. They always have to push, to test boundaries, to see how much they can take before the world finally says no. Fortunately, I was ready for whatever came next. The call came at 6:04 a.m., jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. I fumbled for my phone, my heart immediately racing with the familiar panic of 17 years as the emergency contact for 3 active boys. Mrs. Brown, the voice was professional, clipped. This is Detective Sarah Martinez with Seattle PD. I'm calling about your daughter Rachel Brown Hastings. The formal tone told me everything I needed to know before she said another word. I sat up in bed, my bare feet finding the cold hardwood floor. What's happened? She was arrested last night on charges related to her husband's federal case, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. She's asking for you to contact her attorney. I closed my eyes, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction settle in my chest, more like inevitability, like watching a house collapse that had been built on sand from the beginning. Mrs. Brown, are you there? I'm here. I walked to my window, looking out at the courtyard where my grandsons used to play. Detective, I need you to understand something. My daughter and I are estranged. I have no intention of contacting her attorney or providing assistance of any kind. There was a pause. She said you'd say that. She asked me to tell you that she's willing to sign custody papers in exchange for legal representation. The audacity was breathtaking. Even from a jail cell, Rachel was trying to negotiate, to find an angle that served her interests, as if custody of the boys she'd abandoned was a commodity she could trade for her freedom. Tell my daughter, I said carefully, that I'll be in touch. I hung up and sat in the silence of my small apartment, watching dust motes dance in the morning light. Through the thin walls I could hear my grandsons stirring, the familiar sounds of 3 young men getting ready for school. Marcus's gentle humming as he showered. David's muttered complaints about his calculus homework, Daniel's careful movements as he tried not to wake his brothers. They didn't know yet. In a few hours their phones would start buzzing with news alerts, social media notifications, the digital avalanche that followed any scandal involving money and betrayal. Their classmates would see their mother's mugshot on the evening news. Their teachers would look at them with that particular blend of pity and curiosity reserved for children of criminals. I had to tell them first. Boys, I called softly, tapping on their bedroom door. Can you come out here? We need to talk. They emerged in various stages of readiness. Daniel fully dressed for school, Marcus in pajama pants and a t-shirt, David with his hair sticking up at impossible angles. One look at my face told them this wasn't about chores or schedules. Sit down, I said gently. They arranged themselves on the couch, 3 identical faces wearing identical expressions of concern. Even now, even at 17, they moved as a unit, supporting each other through instinct and years of practice. Your mother was arrested last night, I said without preamble. Sometimes the kindest cut is the cleanest one. The silence that followed was profound. I watched them process the information, saw the flicker of emotions across their faces, surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like relief. For what? Daniel asked finally. Financial crimes related to her husband's business, wire fraud, money laundering. I sat down across from them, my hands folded in my lap. It's going to be in the news. Your classmates will probably see it before you get to school. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice quiet but steady. Is she going to prison? I don't know. Probably. David adjusted his glasses, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. What happens to us? Nothing changes, I said firmly. You're 17 years old, almost adults. You have a home here for as long as you want it. You have college acceptance letters waiting. You have a future that has nothing to do with your mother's choices. She wanted us to move to Seattle, Marcus said softly. With her? She wanted the insurance money, Daniel corrected, his voice hard. We were just the key to accessing it. I winced at the bitterness in his tone, even though he was right. I know this is difficult. No. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window. It's not difficult, it's clarifying. She didn't want us 15 years ago, and she doesn't want us now. Everything else is just details. His brothers nodded, and I saw something I'd never expected, not grief or anger, but a kind of grim peace, as if a question they'd carried their entire lives had finally been answered definitively. Grandma, David said carefully, what did you do? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? You knew this was going to happen, Marcus said. Yesterday, when you left to meet her, you looked different, determined. I studied their faces. These boys who knew me better than anyone in the world had inherited their father's intelligence and their grandfather's intuition. Of course, they'd noticed. I gave her a choice, I said finally. Leave voluntarily or face the consequences of her actions. And she didn't leave, Daniel observed. No, she didn't. So you destroyed her. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I waited for the judgment, the horror, the disappointment that their grandmother had become someone capable of such calculated ruthlessness. Instead, David smiled, a small, sad expression that somehow conveyed both approval and sorrow.
Good,
he said quietly. David, no. Grandma, she had 15 years to be our mother, 15 years to call, to visit, to care. Instead, she shows up when we're about to inherit money and tries to take us away from the only parent we've ever truly known.
His voice grew stronger. You protected us again.
Marcus nodded. How did you know about her husband? I hesitated, then decided they deserved the truth. I hired a private investigator after the custody hearing. I needed to understand why she'd really come back. That must have been expensive, Daniel said. It was my last $1,000, I shrugged. Money well spent. They exchanged glances, that wordless communication that had always amazed. Finally, Marcus spoke for all of them. We're not going to school today. Boys, you can't miss. We're staying home with you, Daniel said firmly. Today is going to be hard enough without dealing with questions from classmates and teachers. David was already reaching for his phone. I'll call in sick for all of us. I wanted to protest, to insist they maintain their normal routines, but the truth was I needed them as much as they needed me. In a few hours, my phone would start ringing, reporters, social workers, lawyers, well-meaning neighbors who'd seen the news. Having my grandsons by my side would make facing that storm easier. Okay, I said, but we're going to spend the day doing something productive, college applications, scholarship essays, planning for your futures. Speaking of which, Daniel said, settling back onto the couch, what happens when we turn 18 with the insurance money? I've been dreading this question. It's yours, all of it. Your father wanted you to have financial security for college and beyond. How much? David asked. Enough to pay for college at any school that accepts you. Enough to start your adult lives without debt. I paused. Enough that your mother thought it was worth destroying our family to get her hands on it. The number, 1.2 million, split 3 ways, had been burning in my mind since I'd first learned of the policy. It was more money than I had ever seen, more than enough to give these boys opportunities I could never provide on my own. She can't get it now, can she? Marcus asked. With the arrest, no. Her legal troubles make it impossible for her to claim guardianship, and you'll be adults before her case is resolved. I smiled, feeling genuine satisfaction for the first time in weeks. Your father's money will go exactly where he intended, to his son's futures. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. The caller ID showed a Seattle number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Brown, the voice was smooth, professional. This is James Morrison, attorney for Rachel Brown Hastings. My client would like to discuss terms for signing over custody in exchange for... I hung up without letting him finish. Her lawyer, Daniel asked. Yes. What did he want? I looked at my grandsons, these remarkable young men who'd survived abandonment and uncertainty to become people of character and strength. They deserve to know exactly how their mother's story ended. Your mother wants to trade you for legal representation, I said bluntly. She's offering to sign away her parental rights if I'll pay for her defense. The silence that followed was different from before, not shocked or hurt but coldly angry. What are you going to tell him? David asked. I walked to my desk and pulled out a piece of paper, the same legal document I'd had prepared weeks ago. Just in case, a formal statement declining any financial responsibility for Rachel's legal troubles, along with a detailed accounting of every expense I'd incurred raising her children. I'm going to tell him exactly what his client is worth to me, I said, reaching for my pen. Nothing. 6 months later, I stood in the corridor of the federal courthouse in Seattle, watching through reinforced glass as Rachel was led away in handcuffs. The orange jumpsuit made her look smaller, somehow diminished. The jury had taken less than 4 hours to find her guilty on all counts. 80 months to 3 years, the judge had said. With good behavior, she might be out in 15 months. By then, my grandsons would be sophomores in college, building lives that had nothing to do with the woman who'd birthed them, and everything to do with the choices they made every day. Mrs. Brown, a reporter thrust a microphone toward my face. How do you feel about your daughter's conviction? I looked directly into the camera, thinking of the boys back home in Portland, probably watching this moment on the evening news from their dorm rooms at 3 different universities. Justice, I said simply, is rarely satisfying, but it's necessary. I walked away from the courthouse and climbed into my car, not the ancient Honda anymore, but a reliable used Subaru I bought with money from an unexpected source. The boys had insisted on using part of their insurance inheritance to ensure I had safe, dependable transportation. Grandma, Daniel had said when he handed me the keys, you've given us everything. Let us give you this. The drive back to Portland took 4 hours, giving me time to reflect on everything that had changed since that morning in the courtroom, when I'd first pulled out the worn envelope. The apartment felt different now, quieter, without the constant bustle of 3 teenagers, but not empty. Their voices still echoed in every corner, and they called every Sunday without fail, taking turns so I heard from at least one of them each week. Marcus was studying Prem at Stanford, his gentle nature perfectly suited for the healing profession he'd chosen. David had followed his love of technology to MIT, where his professors marveled at his intuitive understanding of complex systems. And Daniel was at Northwestern studying journalism with a focus on investigative reporting. I want to expose the truth, he told me, like you did with Mom. My phone rang as I unlocked my apartment door. Daniel's number. Grandma, we saw the news, all of you. Marcus called a conference. We're all here. I could hear voices in the background. My boys, together despite being scattered across the country. Modern technology had its advantages. How are you feeling? This was Marcus, his voice gentle as always. Relieved, I said honestly. Closure has a weight to it.
Good, David's voice was firm. She made her choices.
Now she gets to live with them. There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke again. Grandma, we have something to tell you. We've been planning this for weeks. My heart skipped. At 63, I'd learned to be wary of surprises from the boys I'd raised. They had a tendency toward grand gestures. We're all flying home for Thanksgiving, Marcus said. But that's not the surprise. We bought a house, David announced. Well, we made an offer. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a real kitchen with room for all of us to cook together. I sank into my armchair, the one that had witnessed countless homework sessions and midnight conversations. Boys, it's in your name, Daniel interrupted. Completely paid for. We used our inheritance money. And before you argue, remember that Dad's insurance was meant to secure our futures. Our future includes you, Grandma. It always has. Tears I hadn't expected began tracking down my cheeks. You can't just... We already did, Marcus said gently. The closing is next month. We'll all be home for winter break to move you in, and your education is paid for, David added. We set aside enough for tuition, living expenses, everything. The house money is separate. We planned this carefully, Grandma. We learned from the best. I thought of all the sacrifices I'd made over the years, the missed meals so they could eat, the second-hand clothes so they could have new school supplies, the empty savings account that had funded their dreams. They'd been watching, learning. understanding what family really meant. Besides, Daniel added, and I could hear the smile in his voice, we'll need somewhere to bring our future wives to meet their grandmother-in-law. This apartment is way too small for that kind of intimidation. I laughed through my tears, imagining these three remarkable young men someday bringing partners home, continuing the cycle of love and protection that had defined our little family. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. We've been talking, and we want to legally change our last names to Brown, your name. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 15 years of shared history. They were honoring me in the most profound way possible, claiming me as their mother, as they'd already claimed me in their hearts. Are you sure? I whispered. We've never been more sure of anything, Daniel said firmly. You're our mother in every way that matters. It's time the paperwork reflected that reality. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the completeness of this moment. Rachel had lost everything, her freedom, her money, her children, her dignity. And in losing it all, she'd inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. The absolute certainty that the boys I'd raised knew the difference between the woman who'd given birth to them and the woman who truly loved them. What about your father's name? I asked. Thompson was his family name. We'll hyphenate, David said. Thompson Brown. We'll carry both legacies, Dad's love and your sacrifice. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house. A warm, welcoming space with granite countertops and windows, looking out over a garden where I was already planning to plant vegetables. The boys were home for winter break, filling the house with laughter, chaos, and the particular brand of loving noise only family can create. Daniel was at the kitchen table, laptop open, working on an article about parental abandonment and the grandparents who step in to fill the void. It's an epidemic, he told me. What you did for us, millions of grandparents are doing the same thing, sacrificing their golden years to raise their children's children. Marcus was teaching David how to make their grandfather's famous wontons. Their heads bent together over the kitchen counter as they worked. The sight made my heart ache with happiness, continuity, tradition, love passed down through generations. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Please, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to try to make amends. The boys are my children too, Rachel. She'd found a way to message me from prison. The audacity was breathtaking even now. I showed the message to Daniel, who read it with the same cold analysis he brought to his investigative work. What do you want to do? He asked. I looked around at our warm, bustling kitchen, at Marcus patiently correcting David's folding technique, at the refrigerator covered with college acceptance letters and graduation photos and pictures from family dinners, at the evidence of a life well lived and love well given. Nothing, I said, deleting the message. She had her chance to be their mother. She chose money instead. And us? Daniel asked. What did we choose? I smiled, pulling him into a hug that somehow managed to encompass all three of my boys. All the years we'd struggled and survived and thrived together. You chose love, I said. You chose family. You chose each other. That evening, as we sat around our new dining room table, sharing wontons and stories and plans for the future, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace. The woman who'd raised 3 abandoned toddlers in a cramped apartment had evolved into something stronger, wiser, more purposeful. Rachel had taught me one final lesson, though she'd never intended it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. Her abandonment had forced me to become the mother she'd never been, the protector she'd never chosen to be, the foundation these boys had needed to build their remarkable lives. As I looked around the table at my sons, because that's what they were now legally and completely, I realized that revenge had been unnecessary. Rachel's punishment wasn't the prison sentence or the financial ruin or the public humiliation. Her punishment was missing this. Missing the joy on Marcus's face when he talked about his medical school interviews. Missing David's excitement about his internship at a tech startup. Missing Daniel's passionate defense of social justice over dinner conversation. Her punishment was the absence of love, the void where family should have been, the silence where laughter could have echoed. She'd traded everything that mattered for money she'd never gotten to keep. And in doing so, she'd given me the greatest gift of all, the unshakable knowledge that I was exactly the mother these boys had needed. Justice, I realized, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was simply about choosing love when others chose selfishness, choosing sacrifice when others chose convenience, choosing to stay when others chose to run. The boys were mine now, completely and forever, and I was theirs. That was justice enough.